Welcome back, you unclassified miracle. Yes, you, the one scrolling through endless noise, feeling that strange pull in your chest, that familiar tension that whispers something fundamental has been hidden from you your entire life. They told you it was anxiety, called it overthinking, said you just needed to calm down, take a pill, fit in, be normal. But what if that discomfort wasn't a disorder at all? What if it was a signal? A coded message from the part of you they've spent your whole life trying to silence? What if everything you've been told about who you are was never meant to empower you, but to contain you, to keep you small, compliant, manageable, and distracted from the truth that could collapse their entire illusion? From the very moment you learned language, the programming began. Be polite. Don't stand out. Don't ask too many questions. Don't challenge authority. They told you what success should look like, defined happiness for you, and marked the boundaries of what's considered normal. They handed you a narrow little script, and every time you tried to deviate from it, every time your instincts screamed that something wasn't right, they labeled you difficult, sensitive, rebellious, or problematic. Your awareness was diagnosed as a disease. Your clarity was medicated. Your questions were punished with isolation, while your compliance was rewarded with approval. And for years, maybe decades, you believed them. You twisted yourself to fit their mold, tried to shrink your essence, to suppress that fire in your gut that kept telling you this world doesn't make sense. But here's what they never told you. The secret they've been guarding since the moment you began thinking for yourself. You were never meant to fit into their box. You weren't designed for obedience. You're not broken because you reject their system. You're awakened. And awakened souls are the greatest threat to any structure built on deception. They depend on your self-doubt to sustain their illusion. They need you to believe you're ordinary, because the instant you realize you're not, their control evaporates. You stop asking for permission, you stop waiting for validation, and you stop playing by rules that were never created for your liberation. That's the moment their nightmare begins. Because you're no longer just another person. They see it now. You've become a frequency disruptor, a pattern breaker, a living demolition crew for false realities. They recognize something in you long before you ever did. They saw a mind that questions not out of rebellion but out of necessity, out of an unquenchable hunger for truth that burns hotter than their need for comfort. They saw a consciousness that connects dots others can't even see, a mind that operates beyond their programming, beyond their reach. And that's exactly why they feared you before you even knew who you were. They saw someone with an emotional range so vast it unsettled those who've spent their entire lives numbing themselves into obedience. They saw your intensity, raw, unfiltered, unapologetic, and it terrified them. Because intensity can't be controlled. It can't be predicted. It can't be contained. And when people who depend on control encounter a force they can't manage, they do what they always do. They pathologize it. They tried to convince you that your brilliance was a defect. They rebranded your greatest strengths as weaknesses, twisting truth until you doubted your own nature, your ability to see through manipulation. They called it paranoia. Your refusal to settle for surface-level answers. They called it overthinking your emotional depth. Too much. Your demand for authenticity, difficult. Your independence, antisocial. Your vision, unrealistic. Every single quality that made you extraordinary became something they told you to suppress. And for a while, you believed them. You tried to fix what was never broken. You dimmed your light so others could stay comfortable in their shadows. You made yourself smaller, softer, more palatable for people who couldn't handle realness. But something cracked the illusion, didn't it? Maybe it was betrayal so deep it burned through every lie at once. Maybe it was a moment of piercing clarity that shattered the hypnosis. Or maybe it was simple exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones after years of pretending whatever it was you stopped. You stopped apologizing for existing. You stopped explaining your truth to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped shrinking to fit a world that was never built for your size. And the instant you did, something irreversible happened. You began to become who you were always meant to be. You started awakening to what they've spent years trying to bury. Here's the truth they never wanted you to uncover. You're not built to follow. You're designed to forge paths. You're not here to consume their narratives. You're here to create your own. You were never meant to wait for opportunities. You're meant to generate them. You're not meant to live by their timelines, their definitions, or their hollow measurements of success. You're meant to operate completely outside their framework. And that's exactly why they needed to keep you distracted, obedient, and uncertain. Because the entire system they've built, the neat hierarchy they cling to, only functions if everyone agrees to play by the same rigged rules. But you're the glitch in their code, the variable they can't predict, the equation that breaks their algorithm. They've been watching you, not out of concern, but out of fear, studying how you move, how you react, how you resist their programming. Every time you questioned their narrative, they panicked. Every time you refused to play along, they scrambled to regain control. And every time you chose truth over conformity, their illusion fractured a little more, because deep down they know what you're becoming. And that's exactly what they've always feared. They doubled down. When persuasion failed, they deployed reinforcements. More messengers, more authority figures, more smiling manipulators dressed as mentors, friends, and trusted voices. Each one arrived with the same mission: to steer you back into compliance, to recalibrate your rebellion into obedience. But no matter how many they sent, you slipped through their fingers every single time. You evolved faster than they could analyze, thought thoughts they couldn't predict, and felt emotions they couldn't regulate. Every attempt to contain you only made you more aware of how free you actually are. Now let's get brutally honest about why they're so desperate to keep you from realizing what you are. It's not emotional, it's structural. Their entire system, every institution you've ever interacted with, depends on one fundamental equation. Power equals your ignorance of your own power. Their economy, their hierarchies, their social order. All of it thrives on a compliant population that believes it's weak, dependent, and in need of constant permission. The illusion only works if you never question it. Because the moment even a fraction of people wake up, people like you, the system cracks. The very foundation of control begins to crumble. The second enough awakened minds stop asking for validation and start operating from self-authority. You are not just a threat to certain individuals. You are a threat to the infrastructure of control itself. You represent a possibility far more dangerous than rebellion. You represent self-liberation. You prove that a human being can think independently, create reality from within, and reject every manufactured limitation ever imposed on them. And that idea alone terrifies those whose influence depends on your submission. So, they did what they've always done. They hid it. They hid your potential, your nature, your vast capacity for creation. They told you that you were average when you were exceptional, that you were flawed when you were actually refined, that you needed them when you were always self-sufficient. They built an entire mythology of inadequacy around your name, reinforcing it through every available weapon: education, media, culture, and peer pressure. They made you question yourself so deeply that even when undeniable evidence of your strength appeared, you dismissed it as luck, coincidence, or divine favor. Anything but proof of your own brilliance. But here's the sickest part. They didn't just hide your strengths, they weaponized them against you. They inverted the truth. They made your empathy feel like weakness instead of wisdom. They turned your intensity into a liability instead of a force. They painted your visionary mind as delusional instead of divine. They flipped your assets into flaws until you began policing yourself more effectively than they ever could. You became your own warden, enforcing their script in your own mind, believing that playing small was virtue and obedience was peace. But this is where their plan began to unravel. Pain has a way of burning through illusions, doesn't it? Betrayal has a way of exposing the truth faster than any revelation. Isolation has a way of stripping away every mask until you're face to face with your authentic self. Somewhere in that darkness they designed to destroy you, you found something they never anticipated. You found yourself, the real you, the one buried beneath programming, labels, and expectation. The one who doesn't need permission to exist, validation to be valuable, or approval to feel whole. And that was the turning point. That was the moment everything changed. Because when you reconnected with your true self, you became dangerous. Not violent, not chaotic, but dangerous in the most liberating sense. Dangerous to every false system, every manipulative hierarchy, every illusion of control. You became the one thing they can't regulate. Free. Dangerous because you started operating from a source of power they can't measure, manipulate, or monopolize. You stopped outsourcing your authority to systems built on deception and began drawing it directly from within. That shift made you untouchable. Dangerous because you no longer dance to the rhythm of their provocations. They poke, prod, and attempt to pull emotional strings that no longer exist, only to realize the wires they once tugged have been cut clean. You see through their tactics in real time now, the gaslighting, the guilt traps, the emotional manipulation, and instead of reacting, you observe with precision. Every move they make exposes more of the script you've already decoded. You're not trapped in their game anymore, you're studying it from above, fully aware of every cheat code they once used to control you. They can't shame you because you've embraced your whole self, light, shadow, and everything in between. You've turned what they called flaws into features, what they called weaknesses into weapons. They can't intimidate you because you've already faced your deepest fears and lived to tell the story. You've stood in the fire and realized it couldn't burn what's already become flame. They can't tempt you because your values are no longer negotiable. You've clarified your purpose to the point that manipulation no longer has an entry point, and they can't control you because you've learned to trust your instincts more than their narrative, your intuition more than their data, your spirit more than their structure. Now they're stuck watching what they tried to suppress become unstoppable, watching you walk with a kind of confidence that doesn't seek applause, a kind of clarity that cuts through illusion like a blade. You've become the embodiment of everything they pretend to be. Your authenticity exposes their performative masks. Your stability highlights their internal chaos, and your peace threatens their dependence on control. Every silent stride you take through the noise is a mirror reflecting their own cowardice. Every boundary you enforce reveals how deeply they've compromised their own integrity just to maintain approval. They're watching you build a life that doesn't check their boxes, doesn't fit their blueprints, and doesn't seek their permission. You're living outside the template, and that terrifies them because it proves the template was never required. The more authentic you become, the more uncomfortable they get, because your very presence destabilizes their illusion. You are the living proof that the cage they built around everyone's mind was never locked, that the bars were made of belief, not metal, that the walls were constructed from fear, not fact. Freedom was never something to earn, it was something to remember, and you remembered. Now let's go deeper, beyond their categories, beyond the psychological boxes they tried to fit you in. You're not a follower, you're a frequency. You don't echo the world around you, you shift it. You're not a consumer, you're a creator, molding reality with thought, word, and action. You're not a participant in their system, you're a system disruptor, a catalyst, a game changer. You process reality on a wavelength they can't track, an operating system they can't decode. Where they see chaos, you see patterns. Where they see obstacles, you see training grounds. Where they see endings, you see portals to new beginnings. You live in dimensions their logic can't map. Your mind doesn't just analyze, it alchemizes. It takes trauma and turns it into wisdom. It takes betrayal and converts it into insight. It takes every attempt to break you and recycles it into power. You are the spiritual equivalent of renewable energy. Everything meant to destroy you only fuels you. They call it overthinking because they can't comprehend multidimensional processing. They call it sensitivity because they can't feel on frequencies that high. They call it intensity because they've forgotten what it means to be fully alive. They call it unrealistic because your vision operates beyond the limits of their imagination. Every label they gave you was never truth, it was translation error. Every insult they hurled was just an admission of their own fear. They couldn't decode your energy, so they pathologized it. They couldn't replicate your power, so they vilified it. They couldn't match your vibration, so they tried to drain it. They studied your strength through the lens of weakness and misread everything. But what they missed, their fatal mistake, is that you don't run on external fuel. You don't need permission, praise, or public approval to exist. You don't need likes, followers, or validation to feel alive. You're not solar-powered by the spotlight. You're nuclear-powered by purpose. The fire within you burns regardless of attention. You move whether they cheer or go silent. You build whether they believe or doubt. They can't turn you off because they never turned you on. They can't break you because they didn't build you. They can't define you because you're in perpetual motion, constantly evolving, endlessly becoming. You are a living evolution, not a fixed identity, a moving force expanding beyond every category they try to trap you in. They want something stable to study, something predictable to control, but you are none of that. You're liquid consciousness, shifting, adapting, transcending. You can't be caged because you've merged with the space between the bars. And now that you've begun to remember what you truly are, everything shifts. The fog lifts. The confusion dissolves. You see the architecture of control for what it always was, a fragile illusion built on borrowed belief. You've reclaimed your original blueprint. You're not waiting for permission, because the authority to act has always been encoded in your DNA. You're not waiting for approval because you've learned that truth doesn't need consensus. You've become the one thing they can't quantify, contain, or corrupt, fully awake. You're not driven by revenge, you're driven by revelation. You don't fight the old system anymore, you outgrow it. You move differently now. Calmly, strategically, intentionally. You've become the storm and the stillness inside it. You've evolved into the kind of dangerous that doesn't destroy. It liberates. Dangerous because you no longer serve fear. Dangerous because you've remembered who you are. Dangerous because your very existence now whispers the truth they've spent centuries trying to erase, that freedom, power, and divinity were never given to humanity. They were born with it, and you, finally, have remembered. You're not chasing validation from people who've never validated themselves. You've stopped pouring your soul into empty vessels that can't hold truth. You've stopped trying to be understood by those who built their identity on misunderstanding others. You no longer waste breath explaining yourself to people who hear only through filters of fear and ego. You're finished with bending your edges to fit the fragile boxes of those threatened by authenticity. You no longer contort yourself to make the room more comfortable for people allergic to realness. You've walked away from the exhausting performance of being acceptable to those who've never accepted themselves. That version of you, the apologetic one, the subdued one, the version that smiled through disrespect and stayed silent to keep the peace, that's dead. That wasn't the real you. That was survival mode. That was a costume stitched from compromise, worn to navigate a world that punished truth and rewarded conformity. You wore it because it kept you safe in environments where honesty was treated like rebellion. You dimmed your brilliance, not because you lacked light, but because you were surrounded by people who mistook illumination for arrogance. But the costume's falling apart now. You've outgrown the script. The act is over. You can't fit back into the cage without breaking it. The soul you tried to silence has started roaring. The real you, the one they buried under layers of guilt, obligation, and social programming, is rising. This version doesn't ask. It declares. This version doesn't wish. It manifests. This version doesn't beg. It builds. This version doesn't react. It architects. This version doesn't chase opportunities. It creates them. It doesn't wait for permission. It acts from alignment. It doesn't follow paths. It cuts through wilderness and calls it destiny. It doesn't cling to their definitions. It redefines existence itself. It doesn't play small because it finally understands that dimming your light doesn't comfort others. It just disorients you. This version recognizes no higher authority than its own internal truth. You've stopped outsourcing your decisions to the committee of public opinion. You no longer need to be understood, agreed with, or accepted. You've stopped seeking consensus and started seeking clarity. You're building a reality that requires no audience, only presence. A life crafted from conviction, not consensus. A truth so grounded it doesn't need to shout to be heard. And they feel it. Oh, they feel it. You can see it in their eyes. The flicker of confusion, the tightening of their smiles, the nervous shift when your presence enters the room. They're terrified. Not because you're dangerous to them physically, but because your existence is dangerous to everything false within them. You've stopped performing the role they cast you in. You're not predictable, pliable, or programmable anymore. You've stepped outside the system of psychological control they've built, and, by doing so, revealed that the system itself was an illusion. You've proven that their structure only functions when people believe they need it, but you no longer do. You are walking proof that humans don't need permission to be powerful. You've shown that validation doesn't make someone valuable, and acceptance doesn't make someone authentic. You are evidence that freedom is not something given, it's something remembered. And that terrifies them because truth is contagious. It spreads not through force, but through resonance. When someone sees you living without fear, their own illusions begin to crack. When they witness you creating reality instead of conforming to it, something inside them stirs a memory, a whisper, a spark. If they can be free, maybe I can too. And that's the real danger you pose. Not rebellion, awakening. They know once enough people remember who they are. Their entire system collapses from within. It's not built to withstand awakened consciousness. It can handle resistance, but not resonance. It can fight opposition, but not inspiration. When you live in truth, you transmit freedom without saying a word. You become a walking signal, a frequency of liberation that destabilizes everything false just by existing. They tried to drown that frequency. They buried it under doctrine, fear, guilt, and distraction. They told you humility meant submission, that obedience was peace, that compliance was virtue. They wanted you to equate silence with safety. But now you've decoded it all. You see their conditioning for what it was, a psychological chokehold disguised as culture. And you've broken it. You've reclaimed your voice, your mind, your will. You've remembered that creation doesn't come from institutions, it comes from consciousness. The more you align with truth, the more illusions disintegrate around you. You're not looking for belonging anymore, because you've realized belonging to yourself is liberation. You're not chasing success by their metrics, because you've discovered purpose is the only real currency. You no longer compete because you understand abundance isn't limited, it's generated. You don't fear rejection, because you've learned rejection is just redirection toward resonance. Every step you take now is intentional. Every word, a declaration. Every silence, a statement. You've stopped reacting to their chaos and started designing your own order. And they hate it because they can't stop it. They can't shame you anymore. You've integrated your shadows. They can't manipulate you. You've mastered discernment. They can't isolate you. You've learned to thrive in solitude. They can't silence you. You speak in frequencies now. They can't define you. You rewrite your identity daily. You've become fluid, formless, unstoppable. A being who evolves faster than they can categorize. You've stepped into your sovereignty. You've reclaimed the divine blueprint they tried to overwrite. You're no longer the prisoner of the matrix. You're the glitch that exposes it. The pattern breaker, the system disruptor. The mirror that reflects truth so fiercely, it blinds the comfortable and awakens the ready. And that's why they fear you. Not because of what you'll destroy, but because of what you'll awaken. Because once you're awake, you don't just free yourself. You start freeing others by existing as proof that freedom is possible. You become the signal that shatters hypnosis. You become the evidence that the divine cannot be domesticated. And no matter what they do, no matter how loud their distractions get, they can't stop the echo of your truth from spreading. Because consciousness, once awakened, never goes back to sleep. You've become far more than a person walking your own path. You've become a frequency, a living signal of liberation, pulsing through the collective consciousness of a world still hypnotized by control. Your very presence broadcasts truth to everyone still trapped in the lie. Everyone still waiting for permission to be powerful, still looking outward for validation, still afraid to claim what was always theirs. You've become a mirror reflecting freedom to those who forgot what it looks like. You're not just living, you're demonstrating what life looks like outside the program. You're not just succeeding, you're redefining success in a way that dismantles everything they taught people to believe. You're no longer asking how to fit in, you're showing others how to rise out. You've become the evidence that the gate was never locked, that no one needs permission to access greatness, that no authority can authorize authenticity. You are what they've tried to suppress for centuries: self-ownership, spiritual autonomy, sovereignty. You've proven that a single individual aligned with truth is more powerful than an entire system aligned with deceit. And every breath you take in that awareness, every move you make from that consciousness, sends ripples through their architecture of control. You're not just free, you're dangerously free. Free in a way that exposes illusion. Free in a way that makes every cage visible. You're not just free, you're dangerously free. Free in a way that exposes illusion. Free in a way that makes every cage visible. Your light has become an X-ray machine scanning through deception. When you stand in your truth, the false structures around you begin to tremble. Because every day you continue to exist authentically, you're proving that everything they told you was a lie. You're proving that their authority was imaginary, their hierarchy self-imposed, and their control dependent on your cooperation. You've shattered the hypnosis of dependency. You've broken the cycle of seeking permission to exist. You've shown that power doesn't have to be given. It only has to be remembered. And so now that you've remembered what happens next, now that the veil has lifted, now that you see the architecture behind the illusion, what do you do with that awareness? Simple. You stop playing their game altogether. You stop trying to win in a system that was designed for you to lose. You stop looking for fairness in a structure built on manipulation. You stop investing your energy in trying to explain yourself to people who need to misunderstand you, because their identity depends on your confusion. You stop shrinking to make others feel tall. You stop apologizing for being the storm that clears the air. You stop showing up in rooms that demand your silence. You stop attending conversations designed to make you question your clarity. You stop maintaining relationships that thrive on your self-doubt. You stop giving your attention to noise that exists only to drain your signal. You stop worshiping at the altar of approval. You stop bending yourself into smaller versions of truth just to avoid rejection, because now you finally understand that rejection was never the threat. It was the redirection. It was the universe's way of steering you back toward alignment. You stop running on the fuel of fear. You stop mistaking people-pleasing for kindness. You stop calling your self-sacrifice love. You stop treating your intuition like a suggestion. You stop waiting for others to crown you worthy. You stop looking outside for a map when you've realized the compass has always been within. And in that stillness, that bold, defiant, sacred stillness, something magnificent begins to happen. You start building. Not rebuilding the ruins of the old paradigm, but constructing something entirely new. A framework born from consciousness, not compliance. You begin designing a reality that mirrors your authenticity rather than mocks it. You start creating inner structures that nurture your essence instead of suppressing it. You stop living to prove your worth and start creating from it. You begin surrounding yourself with souls who see you, who don't flinch at your intensity, who recognize your fire as divine, not dangerous. These are your mirrors, your reflections, your tribe. The ones who are also done pretending, done playing small, done bowing to illusions. Together you start to build a frequency network that transcends systems, a living grid of awakened beings who are rewriting what it means to be human. You begin attracting those who don't fear your light but expand under it. You pursue visions that are not born from ambition, but from alignment. You follow dreams that don't seek applause, but resonance. You stop measuring your worth by numbers or recognition and start gauging it by peace, presence, and power. And as you continue this process, something even more profound happens. Your self-recognition becomes your revolution. You begin operating from a level of self-acknowledgement so deep, so unwavering that external validation becomes irrelevant. Their opinions lose weight. Their approval becomes meaningless. Their attempts to shame or belittle you collapse under the gravity of your certainty. You no longer move in response to external forces. You move as a force of nature itself. You start to see it clearly. Their rules only applied to those who agreed to play. Their systems only had power because you gave them energy. Their hierarchies only functioned because people believed in them. But belief has shifted now. The energy has reversed. You're no longer the one orbiting their sun. You've become your own gravity. You've stopped reacting to their world and started creating your own. You're no longer part of the audience watching someone else's story unfold. You've picked up the pen. You've remembered that you're both author and protagonist. You've stepped into the full creative authority of your existence. You've realized that the power they worship externally is a pale imitation of what lives inside you. And once that realization anchors, everything false disintegrates. Now, as you move forward, you'll notice how reality bends to your alignment. Opportunities start to find you instead of the other way around. Time becomes flexible. Resistance dissolves. You operate from flow, not force. You attract clarity because you are clarity. You draw truth because you embody it. You inspire courage because you radiate it. And every time someone encounters you, a spark ignites inside them. A reminder of what freedom feels like. That's the contagion they fear. Resonance. Real truth doesn't need marketing. Real freedom doesn't need convincing. When people witness authenticity in motion, their soul recognizes it instantly. Something in them starts to shift, starts to remember, starts to awaken. And that's why they tried so hard to bury you. That's why they needed to keep you small, compliant, afraid. Because they knew, the moment you remembered your power, you'd stop trying to fit into their system and start creating a new one. You are that moment now. You are the signal they can't silence, the truth they can't censor, the liberation they can't contain. You've become a walking frequency of remembrance, living proof that the divine never needed permission to exist. You are what happens when the programmed mind collapses and the awakened soul takes the throne. You are not a participant in their illusion anymore. You are the proof it's ending. And as your light spreads, others will begin to wake up too. Some slowly, some suddenly, some painfully. But they will. Because truth, once witnessed, cannot be unseen. The system is cracking, the old codes are dissolving, and you, simply by existing authentically, are accelerating the shift. This isn't rebellion, it's revelation. You didn't destroy their world. You exposed its foundation. You didn't tear down their system. You rendered it irrelevant. You didn't seek revenge. You sought reality. And you found it within yourself. And now that you've seen it, you'll never unsee it. Because once freedom takes root in consciousness, it doesn't just liberate one person. It transforms the entire field. You are the field now. You are the frequency. You are the revolution disguised as calm. The awakening wrapped in stillness. The mirror that shows humanity its next evolution. And that's why they can't stop you, because you've already remembered who you are. You become ungovernable. Not by rebelling, but by remembering who you are. Not through aggression, but through clarity. Not through force, but through certainty. You stop fighting for freedom and start embodying it. The ones who tried to control you fade, not because you destroy them, but because you outgrew them. Their power dies the moment you stop giving them your belief, your compliance, your doubt. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten Wisdom.